We begin the second day of INFOCOM 2017 conference with a leadership keynote on the day after tomorrow. This session is brought to you by Cisco Systems, the digital transformation partner for INFOCOM 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very privileged to have in our midst today Mr. Peter Hinssen, international thought leader on radical innovation and digital transformation lecturer at London Business School, MIT Sloan Business School, and more. A very warm welcome to you, sir. But before we invite him onto the dais, I'd like to request Mr. Lakshminarayan Rao, Director and Leader, Digital Transformation Office, Cisco India and SARC, to kindly do the honors of introducing Mr. Peter Hinssen, our esteemed leadership keynote speaker. Sir.
Good morning, everyone. Really nice to be here. Bright day. We are high on spirits, and we are here to actually listen to the famous Mr. Peter Hinssen. We gave the term guru to the world. And who else can actually, lead us in the way of digital transformation? I would believe Peter Hinssen actually is qualified to be a guru for organizations to lead the digital transformation charge. I've had the opportunity to actually converse with him over the last 2 days, and I can tell you, if there's anyone who's actually compelling to lead the digital transformation story, it's primarily Peter. I'll take a few minutes to actually introduce Peter to all of you. Peter's actually a serial entrepreneur, which means he's actually, done all of that. His approach is actually a very pragmatic, practical approach because he's actually, set up and successfully exited a few startups before, doing what he's doing now, and he continues to be active on the startup circuit. He's an advisor, a keynote speaker of repute all over the world on topics of radical innovation. The timing is now on innovation, leadership, and impact of all things digital to society and business. He's the author of 4 best-selling books. And he recently launched his 4th book, which is called The Day After Tomorrow. For me, it was actually a treat going through the book, primarily because it is a survival guide towards that, how do we actually traverse the digital vortex and, lead the digital transformation charge for organizations. He has also written books on The Network Always Wins in 2014. That seems like actually, our side of the street at Cisco. When the outside world has actually evolved into one, the topic is about that. And in the new normal, and I think he can actually take a lot of credit for introducing the term the new normal, which is so much a part of our lexicon today, he writes about how companies should explore the limits of the digital world and what happens when technology just becomes normal and ubiquitous like it's happening now. Business and IT Fusion, which was his first book in 2008, was a guide on how to solve the conflict between business and IT, which we are experiencing today. He was actually, pretty forward-thinking about, how business and IT will be at loggerheads, and he's actually written what is pretty much actually, a manual on how business and IT can actually commingle, exist, and work together to success. As I said earlier, he's a very sought-after keynote speaker, business school lecturer, and a board member. He's given numerous keynote speeches, mostly in all of the corporates, as well as actually, industry-leading events. He's actually a much sought-after speaker, and it's really an honor for me to introduce him to all of you. And it's a matter of pride here at Calcutta to think that actually this is Peter's first visit to India, and he's actually chosen Calcutta to actually start his journey into India. So we've been actually talking a lot about, what's happening in India and so on. So Peter, welcome. He lectures at renowned business schools like the London Business School, the MIT Sloan School of Management, and he's a board advisor on subjects related to innovation and technology across multiple organizations. For more than 15 years, Peter has led a life of technology startups. His first company, Ecom, was acquired by Alcatel-Lucent, his second Streamcase by Belgacom, third venture was quoted on the stock exchange in 2006 and acquired by Descartes. Between startups, he's been an entrepreneur in residence with McKinsey and Company. So, like I said earlier, he's actually been there, done that, and who better than Peter to walk us through this digital vortex and tell us a few ways of surviving the digital vortex that is there and how we can actually lead to digital transformation. Peter, I welcome you over here, and please join me here on stage for a quick discussion on digital transformation.
Thank you. Thank you, Lex.
Please come.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure having you here, Peter. It's really been good talking to you the last couple of days, and your thoughts are actually absolutely refreshing, to say the least. Let me actually start off, talking about, your book on the new normal. When you wrote the book, The New Normal, I guess it was primarily to talk about, how digital is becoming ubiquitous and how it's actually taking center stage in our lives, very quietly, very silently, and we see that actually happening here as we go through disruption. Can you actually talk to us about, what the journey has been like?
Sure, and I think as an author, you always hope that your book is going to last for some time. When I wrote The New Normal, I had this idea that technology would become as normal as breathing or drinking water, and then it became reality really quickly. And I think our children are probably the best lens to look at that. My kids are 14 and 18. They've grown up in a world where digital isn't even an adjective anymore for them. I always make the simple test: if you put a camera on a table and you ask what is it, we will probably still say, oh, that's a digital camera.
Right.
And my kids say it's a camera because they've never seen an analog camera in their life. So do me one favor: if you walk out this room, never use the adjective digital anymore, because you will sound very old school.
Oh, that's really nice. I think we'll have to drop the word digital here, because that's actually normal. Calling it digital will actually, kind of compartmentalize it, but that's really the new normal, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting to see how maybe it's even beyond digital.
Yes.
I think the interesting thing about this next generation is that they're not digital natives per se, they're network natives.
Yes.
If I see how my kids are grown up in a world where access to becomes ubiquitous, maybe that is the new normal, and not just the fact that it has an on-off switch.
Okay, right. One of the things that we are hearing quite a lot, and even the tenor and of this conference is also digital transformation. We hear a lot about digital transformation. We've seen actually a lot of speakers refer to digital transformation. Why is it that we actually need an intervention like a digital transformation here to actually let organizations know that it is the way to the future? Tell me one thing, Peter. Through your experience, why is it that organizations are actually sort of blind to radical technologies? Is it actually that they can't really see what's coming up? Is it actually too much of a very hierarchical processes within the organization that will actually stifle innovation? Why is it that upstarts are now actually giving the incumbents run for their money?
Well, there's a lot of aspects to that question. I think the first thing is we're used to continuing to do what we're used to doing.
Right.
We're extending our comfort zone. And this is very natural for many organizations, and especially successful organizations, because if you find something that really works, well, the best strategy is to keep on doing what you know. And I think in this world where digital becomes normal, we're seeing a fundamental shift where, I'll put it very bluntly, many companies out there, they see digital and they add on digital. They bolt on digital.
Yeah.
But in a world that is changing so fast, I think you have to find a way to build in digital. And bolt on and built in, I think, are two fundamental things.
Right.
And many companies say, oh, okay, this is easy. We just add a little social media here, and we just do something digital and e-commerce there, and we're fine.
Yeah.
And I think this is the fundamental difference with some of the startups.
Yes.
These startups, they really have digital built in.
Yes.
They were created in a world where technology and digital has become normal. And that's why I think they're fundamentally different than those companies that are just adding it on.
Yeah.
And that's probably why they're accelerating so quickly at this moment.
So this battle is about actually thinking digital to being born digital.
Yes, and I think this is why I think I have no idea what the average age of this audience is, but there's one thing: you're too old. That is, I don't want to offend you, but that is basically what it is. Yeah. If you have really smart 21, 22-year-olds who join your company, they're probably closer to that digital future. They're more connected to that network world.
Yes.
And maybe, this is the voice of the customer of tomorrow. This is the employee of tomorrow. And I think being in tune with that changing reality is absolutely essential.
Totally. I think this augurs well for India. And even actually in my speech yesterday, I was talking about the demographics dividend that we have in the country. As a nation, we've got a lot of people who are young. And that, I think, actually means that they're born digital. They're digital natives, if I can actually use a much oft-repeated phrase. So do you reckon actually that will give us a fillip in this digital emergence of a digital economy?
I think it's essential in the sense that if you see the opportunities, and
Yeah.
as you said, this is my first trip to India, so
Yeah.
I'm just dipping my toe into the water.
Yeah.
But the opportunities of a country that now has a very, very young population,
Right.
where technologies and digital allow you to scale ideas and concepts really quickly.
Right.
We had a chat yesterday
Yes.
about PayTM,
Yeah.
and I was fascinated by how quickly PayTM has grown.
Yeah.
To 200 million users in a very, very short period of
Indeed.
time.
Yeah.
And there you see the power where a new idea, a new technology, and especially a new business model
Yep.
can actually propagate through the network very quickly.
Yep.
And if you have a user adoption, you probably have a possibility of almost exponential growth. Of course, there is no exponential forever. At a certain moment, it actually dies down.
Right.
But I think the possibilities of seeing things that happen more quickly than ever before are absolutely here.
Yeah. In the US, you've got a role model like Elon Musk, who actually signifies innovation of the first degree. China's got Jack Ma. How important is it for role models to actually lead on the charge towards digital?
I think it is absolutely crucial. And you had Steve Jobs in the past. You
Yes.
have Elon Musk now.
Yeah.
I've been teaching at MIT for the last couple of years. And what is interesting there is that it attracts some of the smartest students from all around the world, from China, from India. And the Chinese example is interesting because up until about 3 years ago, all the really, really smart Chinese students at MIT, they wanted to graduate, move to Silicon Valley and become rich. And now they can't wait to go back to China, and they all want to be the next Jack Ma.
Yes.
And I think having that icon, having that role model is essential.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, the PayTM guy might be one of those role models where you have young people now who think it can be done in India.
Yeah.
It can be done here. And we don't need to go to Silicon Valley to build something that is significant.
Yeah.
There is plenty of opportunities to do that right here.
Yeah, excellent. I was actually, reading the book The Day After Tomorrow. I read the first chapter and I just couldn't put it down. I mean, there's absolutely a style of writing that Peter employs, which is very endearing, which is very addictive. Tell us a little bit about The Day After Tomorrow. I think it's a topic that actually covers a wide spectrum, wide swath of what's happening in the world today. I feel, and I actually mentioned that in the intro as well, that it's almost a survival guide to organizations as they actually chart through the waters, of digital.
Yeah, and the title is maybe a little bit misleading because, as you know, there's a disaster movie with the exact same title. And I spent many wonderful conference calls with the studio to clear the rights for my book.
Is that right?
But the whole idea of the day after tomorrow is very simple. Most companies look at tomorrow with what they know today.
Yeah.
And in a world that changes fast, you're going to be too late. That's the whole idea of the book. So instead of looking at tomorrow with the lens of today,
Yeah.
look at this day after tomorrow.
Yeah.
And new ideas and new concepts, new business models, and then calculate back, and you
Yeah.
might come up with a different tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I take the example, I mean, budget cycles. Huh? I see many companies who are now finalizing their budget for 2018. The budget cycle is one of the most amazing things ever invented, I think, in management science. It's a yearly sadistic ritual that we go through where people put in imaginary numbers into Excel and they consolidate that into a budget where everybody understands that, well, we tried. Huh?
Yeah.
And it's always an extrapolation of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Whereas if you would look at a world that is changing so quickly and look at what is just beyond the horizon and then figure out what you need to do to be prepared, that is the whole idea of the day after tomorrow.
Excellent. And I would suggest here, just look up Peter Hinssen on the net. There's a wealth of information available. It's really interesting. His TED Talks, everything is actually, really, really nice for you to actually get a glimpse of, what Peter is thinking about and how he's actually, leading us on the journey to digital transformation. So Peter, actually, I know you got an organization which actually, helps organizations traverse that path. Tell us a little bit about your next works.
Well, what NextWorks tries to do is trying to inspire companies to think about what that day after tomorrow could be.
Right.
And really also get people maybe more in tune and get them the right skills to actually challenge that.
Right.
A fundamental problem that we have is that, and there are many technologists here in the room today,
Yeah.
many CIOs here, and in any normal world where technology become so, dominant,
Yes.
you guys should be rock stars. You should be the rock stars of your organization. But this is not always the case.
Yeah.
And I think this is fascinating. And we're trying to do something to really help these people.
Yeah.
Because I really believe that in a world where technology becomes normal, the possibilities of, as a technologist, using that and leveraging it are insane.
Yeah.
The problem is also with the technology departments, the IT departments of many organizations, they're still often just really doing the today stuff.
Right.
And a little bit of the tomorrow. And I think, many of the CIOs and technologists should be almost the leaders in that day after tomorrow thinking inside companies.
Yeah. This actually, brings a famous saying of Albert Einstein to mind. He actually mentioned that, there's no time to think about tomorrow. It'll come too soon. Isn't it right?
Absolutely. And of course, it's difficult to think about, the future. It's easy to look back and say, it was obvious. Huh?
Yeah.
But I think it is essential. One of my favorite sayings, I don't know who said it, it was some general who said, when you go to war, plans are useless, but the aspect of planning is essential.
Is essential.
And I think this is exactly what you need to do. If you want to figure out what that day after tomorrow is, I think you need to spend time to figure out what that second horizon really is.
Okay, so you got to actually really be thinking on your feet as well. I mean, that's actually the reason why I was thinking it's a survival guide for organizations in many ways. Just actually, really looking at India, you would have actually heard the India story quite a lot. We've got the third largest hub in the world for startups. And the startup scene in India actually is, really, really hot. And we've been dabbling in, many of those emergent technologies are, using the word emergent is actually risky in technology because it's here. It isn't emergent, it's emerged. So by the time this discussion gets over. So we talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about blockchain, and there's a lot of exciting work that's actually happening. So as an outsider, how do you actually see this? Do you see that, this has actually got the potential to, pitchfork India into the super league on technology?
I think it does, but you have to be quick.
Right.
I think what is happening now is that in the last 15 years, we've seen the rise of the Silicon Valley ecosystem in terms of digital. Google, Facebook, Amazon. And what is interesting is many geographies around the world have just adopted that.
Yes.
I live in Europe. Europe is completely dominated by the Silicon Valley ecosystem in terms of digital. Google has 97% of search in Europe.
Right.
What we now see happening is a second digital ecosystem, which is coming out of China. And it's no longer the Chinese digital ecosystem, it's the new Silk Road ecosystem. And I think this is fascinating. What China is doing with their economic expansion is they're taking their digital giants, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, with them. Yep. And you almost see a polarization of the world into two ecosystems. And what I see happening here is a focus on startups, a very deeply rooted understanding of technology, entrepreneurship, the possibility of scaling up. I think India has the potential to be a third player in this geopolitical scene of digital ecosystems, but you have to be fast. I think you have no time to waste.
Absolutely. I think, agility is the name of the game. I think there are a lot of upsides, a lot of pluses that are working in our favor. Peter's actually repeatedly used the word, we got to be fast. And I think that's really a strong message for all of us, all of those who are driving innovation, and also the startups which are actually, focusing on creating some magic with their technology. Tell us a little bit about Peter the person.
Well, I'm a technologist at heart. I really still love technology. The only confrontation I have is I have, as I said, two kids, 14 and 18. And it's interesting to see that I'm an engineer. I mean, I've been in technology all my life. Wow. And sometimes these damn kids are just much smarter than I with technology. And my 18-year-old tricked me the other day. We were having breakfast, and she had to do some presentation for school on what she wanted to become when she wanted to choose her studies. And she said, I'm going to be just like you, Dad. And at that moment, you think, oh, wow, fantastic. Huh? She said, if I see that you travel around the world talking about new technologies and how little you know, it must be the easiest job in the world. So that puts everything in perspective.
Interesting. That's Peter the person. I also read that you actually are, a major Mac fan. How many Macs do you have?
Well, according to my wife, too many Macs. But I've been collecting Apples for the last 25 years.
All of Apple's, yeah.
And I think I'm probably one of the largest collectors in Europe. Wow. There's one guy in Italy who has more, which bugs the hell out of me. But I think what I really want to do is open up an Apple museum. I think that would be my retirement plan. So.
Oh, you took the words off my mouth. I was about to ask you that. Interesting. So, one of the things I wanted to actually check with you, and we really need a 1-minute spiel from you. Tell us actually, in 1 minute, the flip that's happening.
I think the real fundamental flip that is happening is that we live in a world which I believe is as impressive as what happened in the Industrial Revolution. The way we organize our lives was completely changed by the Industrial Revolution. And I think we're living that again. But the flip we need to do in terms of rethinking organizations, rethinking customers, and rethinking how we think about innovation, speed, and business models has never been so important. And I think this is the time to do that.
59 seconds and perfectly within the minute. Thank you so much. I really can't wait to hear from you. I know you got a presentation over here.
Yes.
If you could actually do your keynote. And to the audience over here, we will have some questions towards the end. I'm sure you have a lot of questions to actually ask of Peter and get answers to some things that are on your mind. So I would like to now invite Peter to actually come up on stage and enlighten us about digital. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks,
it's been
Lux.
a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, I'm really pleased to be able to talk about this concept of the day after tomorrow. And it's fascinating to see that we live in a world that is constantly changing, where innovation becomes absolutely core. And still, a lot of this technology is really very young. And some of you are believers. I think most of you in the audience are believers. But sometimes you have to talk to people in your company that are not believers. This is one of my favorite images. This is an advertisement which is 100 years old from somebody who was selling horses in New York City. And the automobile suddenly appears on the scene. And he put out an ad in the New York Times saying that cars are stupid and horses will always be the dominant technology, which is fascinating. And I'm sure that you probably see these people inside your company very often who just don't believe that all this new technology is going to be so prevalent. Are we living in a world that is really happening faster than ever before? I spend almost 3 months a year in Silicon Valley, which is a very strange place. I know that many of you have been there. Somebody called Silicon Valley 400 square miles surrounded by reality. And I think that's a very good way to describe it. You get naturally high on the optimism when you're there. But I think what is happening now is, in my opinion, something like we've never seen before. And we, and most of you are technologists, we technologists are the worst to actually predict how quickly things will pan out. This is the very first tweet that Jack Dorsey actually put out, and it's only 11 years old. And this is my favorite image of the last presidential election. In the US, it's fascinating to see how technology has played such a crucial role in the elections, and it's amazing to see how it became absolutely normal in record time. And I think this is interesting to observe. We live in a world that is truly the new normal. We live in a world where we're constantly connected and we're never offline. And this is probably one of the most depressing images that I have. What you see here are two people in bed, and their faces are illuminated by the shining of their smartphones. And this would have been almost unthinkable just a couple of years ago. The irony about this picture is they're probably talking to each other. They're probably communicating on who picks up the kids the next day and who brings home bread or milk. It's fascinating to see how this has become absolutely normal in record time. And especially, I think the next generation is the lens to look at that day after tomorrow. The Atlantic talks about the touchscreen generation. We've all heard the stories about the one-year-olds who crawl up to the TV and are frustrated that the TV doesn't swipe. This is my favorite one. This is a Santa Claus letter of a young girl to Santa, and she says, "Dear Santa, how are you? I'm good. Here is what I want for Christmas." And then the Amazon URL of what this child wants to have under the Christmas tree. I think it's fascinating to see how we live in a world where these are the consumers of tomorrow. This is how they will think about, living and shopping, and this is for them actually the new normal. As I said, I have 2 kids. My youngest is heavily game addicted. This is the game he likes to play the most. It's called Grand Theft Auto, which is a horrible and terrible game. After the exploding Samsungs last year, this is the latest incarnation of the game, where next to a grenade, you can actually pick up a Samsung Note Galaxy, and then in the game, use that to basically blow up stuff. Which is fascinating to see how reality and virtual have caught up so incredibly fast. And it's, for me, an illustration of the fact how quickly are things evolving. And if you look at it, I think we're slowly in an environment where we go from digital is special to digital is normal. And a lot of the technologies that we have been debating in our community for the last, say, couple of years have now become actually quite normal. When you talk about social or mobile or cloud or big data, I would argue that these are not day after tomorrow. They're just today technologies. They're not even tomorrow. This is now the reality. And what I would love to do is actually take you onto that journey, onto that day after tomorrow, because in my opinion, the set of technologies that we're going to see in the next couple of years are probably going to be even more impactful than anything we've seen in the last 20 years. And for me as a technologist, I get really excited about that. On top of that, we're entering an era. One of my colleagues at London Business School, Linda Grattan, talks about the 100-year life. And children born today have a pretty good chance of becoming 100. Which is interesting because our parents still had the naive idea that if you study until 22, you have enough knowledge to last until your retirement. You already know that that doesn't work. Think about the 100-year life. Think about the enormous challenges of constantly educating yourself and thinking about the future that we're going to see. So I get excited about this, and some people say, it's scary, it's a bubble. And I'll be the first to say, maybe it is. End of last year, these are the 5 largest companies on the stock exchange in the US. And what you see is that all of them are technology companies. This used to be the place where you had Exxon or GE. Now the 5 largest companies are technology companies. And you can say, well, this is a financial bubble. Maybe so. But if you look at the largest brands, these are the largest, most valuable brands. And you see that in the top 6, the only one that is not a technology company is Coca-Cola. So we are living in a world where it's not just a financial aspect, where you say it's a financial bubble, but it's really consumers who really believe that technology really is something that is extremely mainstream. And people say, I'm not sure about this concentration of power. What is really interesting is that we're actually going beyond transformation, and we start to talk about disruption. And disruption is when transformation happens too fast, or faster than our comfort zone. Digital transformation is controlled. Disruption is when we feel that it is actually just going a little bit too fast. And I have a couple, I get excited about this. I mean, as a technologist, I just love this stuff. But then sometimes I do a presentation like this in front of the board of directors of, say, an insurance company, and sometimes these people don't always share the same excitement about technology as I do. And this is fascinating because we live in a world where this is going to happen more and more. Let me show you an example. This is one of my favorite videos. This is the introduction of the self-driving Uber in San Francisco about 6-7 months ago. 2 passengers hail an Uber, a self-driving Uber appears, they get in, and look very closely. This man is very important. This man is the Uber driver in the self-driving car, and his only job is to do nothing for 8 hours a day, just to reassure the passengers. Because if you're a passenger and you get into a self-driving Uber, you think, this is scary. So they put a guy in the car just to reassure the passengers. And the only job is to do nothing for 8 hours a day, which is psychologically very fascinating. This is one of my favorite images. This is a self-driving auto truck, actually, self-driving auto truck, delivering a fleet of self-driving Ubers to the place of deployment. This would have been science fiction just 3 years ago. And now it's reality. And for me, this is wow. This is, as a technologist, wow. And this is, oei. This is the first self-driving Uber crash in Phoenix just before the summer. And what happened is spectacular. The car, the algorithm of the car made a maneuver, and the guy that I was talking about, whose job it is to do nothing, panicked, took control over the steering wheel, and crashed into the other car. So imagine, your only job is to do nothing for 8 hours a day, and if you do something, that's the result. Well, it wasn't his best day. Huh? So what is fascinating is that Uber immediately terminated the program. They did the analysis, and after 3 days, they came to the conclusion that the algorithm had acted correctly and that the human had made a mistake, and they fired the guy, which is interesting. And I think this is the next 20 years. It's a combination of wow and oei. And you're going to be instrumental in making that happen. You're going to have to lead your company into areas where you're going to do things that seem wow as a technologist and scary as an individual or as a corporation. And I believe this is the canvas of the next 20 years. This is the canvas of that day after tomorrow. We're now seeing that science fiction becomes reality. If you look at it, just 2 weeks ago, Uber announced it was buying 24,000 of these Volvos, a $1.4 billion investment to put 24,000 of these self-driving Ubers on the road. And this is in Pittsburgh, where they have been test driving the Ubers, the self-driving Ubers for the last year and a half, constantly running through all sorts of scenarios to make this happen. And it's really fascinating to see how quickly that science fiction is actually turning into reality. Waymo, the self-driving car division of Google, said at the same moment that they're ready to roll this out. Science fiction becomes reality faster than ever before. And as a technologist, I get excited. But as a corporation, it's really scary. And corporations sometimes do knee-jerk reaction that are really, really strange. Some of you might say, you know, whatever. This is one of the most depressing books I have ever read. I would actually urge you, don't read this book. It's called On Death and Dying by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she describes the 5 stages of grief of people who become terminally ill. And it's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. If you have cancer, you go through these 5 stages of grief. But honestly, it's the same recipe for digital transformation. And most companies are still in denial. People are saying, oh yes, it's very interesting for all the other people in the room, but not for us. Huh? And then some people get angry. I mean, I could imagine that the taxi drivers got angry at the Uber drivers, and very soon the Uber drivers will get angry at the self-driving Ubers. Huh? And I think it's the same type of staging that you go through. What is fascinating is that sometimes companies make really, really stupid ways of dealing with that. This is something that happened in Europe about a month ago. Deutsche Bank, one of the largest banks in the world, the CEO did something really, really stupid. He invited his employees for a company event, and the CEO of Deutsche Bank said to his employees, he said, we have too many people in our company who are doing things that robots are doing. We have too many people behaving like robots in our company. You know what, he said? We should replace them by robots. It will be cheaper and more efficient. He literally said, what we had is nice, but it's not necessary for the future. I'm not really sure what kind of motivational message he was trying to give to his employees, but it's fascinating to see that there is a little bit of a dark side to this disruption as well. One of my favorite moments happened just before the summer when Amazon in the US purchased Whole Foods. And about 3 months before that happened, Amazon released this video, and you've probably all seen the video. This is the famous Amazon Go video. This is the video which basically takes the Uber experience to the retail environment. You walk in to...
whatever you like.
No, you don't need the sound on this. No sound. What it basically does is it actually just takes the Uber experience into retail. The nice thing about an Uber is you don't need to take out a credit card or use cash. You just walk out. And this is the same thing. You walk in, you're recognized by your mobile phone. You take off the shelf what you want, and the moment that you want to pay. You don't have to wait in a checkout line. You don't need a credit card. You don't need a debit card. You just walk out. And when this came out, people said, why? I mean, Amazon is an online retailer. Why do they do that? And then, boom, we knew when they bought Whole Foods for $13.4 billion. Whole Foods is a small supermarket chain, but very in the best cities in the US, in the best locations, with an amazing focal audience. I mean, absolutely brilliant acquisition. And they paid $13.4 billion for it. And this is the reaction on the stock market the moment that Amazon announces the acquisition. What you see happening there is that Amazon announces the deals and boom, it jumps 3%. I'll do the math for you. The market cap of Amazon is 500 billion. 3% extra is 15 billion. So they buy Whole Foods for 13.4 and the market says, well done, here's 15 billion, keep the change. That was a good day for Amazon. Huh? But look at the reaction of the others. The Walmarts and the Costcos and the Targets dropped 10-15%. Does it mean that these companies are instantly worth less? No. It's that the analysts don't believe that the innovation is going to come from these guys. They believe the innovation is going to come from these guys. And this is fundamental. We're seeing a disruption, and it's a mentality. It's a mindset, maybe more than anything else. And I'm always reminded of this amazing book by Charles Dickens. This is a classic of Western literature, A Tale of Two Cities. This is an amazing book that I have never read, but people tell me it's an amazing book. Huh? But everybody here knows the opening line. It's the best of times and it's the worst of times. And this, I think, in my opinion, describes exactly what the next 20 years are going to be. Wow and ooh. I mean, as a technologist, you're going to say yes. And as a business, you can say, oh, what is this going to mean for me? Best of times, worst of times. And what is fascinating is we technologists are the worst to predict the future. Bill Gates, in my opinion, one of the smartest people in our industry, was asked in 1998 to say something visionary. And he said, eventually, everyone's business card will have an email address on it. That was a visionary statement 20 years ago. Now, if you meet somebody here at this amazing conference and they give you a business card and it doesn't have an email address, there's only one conclusion: that must be a very wealthy individual. That's the only logical conclusion after 20 years. And we now live in a world where technology has become absolutely normal. We don't even consider it technology anymore. It's just normal. Everybody feels comfortable with technology. World leaders feel comfortable with technology. Global leaders feel comfortable with technology. Spiritual leaders feel comfortable with technology. Most world leaders feel comfortable with technology. Let me take a nuance there. A cat can become a sensation on Instagram. And we do stupid things. This is an airplane in the US which got into trouble. The oxygen mask come down, and what's the first reaction of the passengers? Let's take a selfie, which is ironic if you think about it. This is absurd. We see these successes every single day. And we're on this transition where technology becomes normal. And some of you come from the old normal. I come from the old normal. My father was in technology. When I was 11 years old, we had an advertisement in our house, in a magazine. In 1980, I kept this. It's framed over my office. And it was advertising a 10 megabyte hard disk for $3,495. You can imagine, this was a fortune in 1980. Now, if you are back in the office, you make a PowerPoint, it's always bigger than 10 megabytes. You email it. It doesn't go through the email immediately. You're frustrated with the idiots in your IT department that they can't even do email right. This is the evolution in 35 years. And I always show two clips. I need a little bit of audio on this one. I always show these two clips. In the old days, we technologists would introduce technology. But actually, users didn't know how to use technology at all. In many cases, the users actually had a completely wrong way of using technology. And sometimes with disastrous consequences as a result. And yeah, it's funny to see that. Let me show you a second clip. I always show the second clip. This is the woman who's been out of the office for a long time and has no idea how technology has changed. And you get the joke. But if I show this to my children, they have no idea why it's funny. Huh? I mean, if we laugh, we're the last of the Mohicans who gets this joke. Huh? It's fascinating to see that we live in the technology world now where technology is hot. You cannot open a magazine and we talk about the celebrity CEOs of tech companies. But it's a really harsh environment. BlackBerry stopped making BlackBerries. And Business Week put the BlackBerry on the cover as an ancient Canadian communication device. Fascinating to see. And then we see the absurdity from a financial point of view. WhatsApp, not even a very good messaging app, was acquired by Zuckerberg 3 years ago for an absurd $16 billion. And people say, oh, we have these unicorns with billion-dollar valuations, and it's going to come crashing down. And I'm old enough to remember the first dot-com hype. This is a slide from 1999. And in 1999, all you had to do was put .com after your name, and you could claim any valuation. And we knew it happened. In March of 2000, the NASDAQ, boom. And it can happen this year. It can happen before the end of the year. And you know what? It makes no difference, because technology has become normal. And I was in Italy this summer, where an Italian artist had painted the logos of today onto the artifacts of the past, where you see how things are disappearing, yeah, really quickly. How we communicate in a completely different environment. How we live in a society in a different environment. And I love this, two old ladies chatting away under a Twitter sign. Yeah? It's fascinating to see that this is the most natural gesture known to the next generation. We've gotten used to the fact that we can put our finger on a piece of glass, swipe, and connect to anybody on the planet and to every piece of information. This is the new normal. And what if we're only getting started? My point is, don't look at technology, look at behavior. This is fascinating. This is how adults use technology. This is in the UK, but I think it's very similar here. And this is the relevance for the next generation. This part here is making a phone call. My kids never pick up the phone. They never pick up the phone. But the most worrying thing is this part. This is email. This is the relevance of email for the next generation. I came home the other day. My daughter hands me her laptop because there was a problem. And I am the sysadmin of the Hinssen family. I have to fix stuff. Huh? So I open up the laptop and I see to my horror that on the email icon on my daughter's laptop that she has 3,742 unread mails. Now, I don't know how you feel if you have 3,742 unread mails, but I panicked. She saw my panic. She took the laptop out of my hands. She opened mail. She did select all, delete, and said, problem solved, Dad. Well, fascinating. Email for this generation is for really old people. And what is interesting is, this is the generation that in 3-4 years' time will join your company, and on the first day, if you say, this is your email address, they will look at you as if they've seen a dinosaur. And I think this is truly interesting. It's not technology, it is behavior. And I think, I have no idea how old you are. I mean, I was dragged into this world when my father came home with this 35 years ago. He hooked this up to the TV and it produced that. That was a wow moment in my life. I played these games like crazy. I loved playing these games. And some of you will remember that. I mean, this is something that is part of our collective past. This is the game I wanted to play. It was called Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I put this in my Atari, and it produced that. Okay? Let me go back. This is marketing, and this is reality. And look very closely here, because this here in the middle was Indiana Jones in 1982. And I played it for months. This is the game my kids play on the PlayStation 4. It's called Uncharted. And this is the lead character, Nathan Drake. And sometimes I cannot even see if this is real or computer generated. This is the evolution in 35 years. Don't think it stops here. What if we're only halfway there? When I was young, my mother, bless her heart, had one important concern for me. Don't sit too close to the TV. That was very important for her. And then this is the future, which is ironic on many, many levels. And these are two slides from Facebook, where if you see how quickly in the online world we've gone from text to images to moving images, and we're about to take a quantum leap. We're about to engage users in a way that we've never seen before. We're about to use augmented and virtual reality to give experiences like we've never been able to give users in terms of experience. And I think this is fascinating to observe. Facebook launched Facebook Spaces just before the summer, where they're trying to see this as the new normal on how our kids are actually going to think about this. The type of experience and engagements we're going to have in the next 5, 10, 15 years are going to be mind-blowing in terms of possibilities. This is Magic Leap, a startup in Florida that is basically bringing Star Wars into your living room. Think about the opportunities in business to business, where everything will have an overlay of information. Everything that we perceive will have information as the extra dimension. Think about how we could redefine education as a result. But not for everyone. Some people won't cope. Some people will have serious difficulty in adjusting to this new reality. And I think this is fascinating if you look at it. I mean, you will have those people who see it as wow, and those who will see it as ooh. And we're only getting started. And the mental image I want you to have this morning is, what if we're only halfway there? And these are the 4 things that I want to have a deeper dive on. I think we're entering a world where 4 fundamental forces are going to reshape how we think about the future. It's the rise of global platforms, networks, it's information at the core, it's information becoming intelligent, and then the possibility of automation. I think that is a powerful cocktail to think about this day after tomorrow. And let me start with platforms. This is not new. I mean, we've seen that. When we're in Silicon Valley, we love to work with the people who are putting oil onto the fire, the people who supply the capital. The venture capital industry is always looking at that next horizon. And one of our favorite companies to deal with in Silicon Valley is called Andreessen Horowitz. It's run by this man, Mark Andreessen. He is the founder of Netscape, and if you're old enough, you remember going online with a Netscape browser in the 90s, and now he's, I think, the most important venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, and he wrote a brilliant op-ed piece, Software is Eating the World. And if you haven't read it, read it. It's very simple, you just Google it. But he basically said, it used to be tech for tech. It used to be Intel making chips for Compaq. But now it's technology which is eating the world. Technology is changing markets. And this is fun. This is exciting. This is why Uber has become such a global brand in 5 years' time. We recently went to Silicon Valley with a big bank, and we decided not to use a bus. We only used Uber. We didn't go to a hotel. We only used Airbnb. We didn't even hire a meeting room in a hotel. We used Breather, which is the Airbnb of meeting rooms. We didn't go to a restaurant. We used Feastly, which is a collaborative platform where brilliant chefs prepare you brilliant meals. And these people don't want to run a restaurant every single night. They are part of this collaborative economy. It's fascinating. And if you go and are successful, you can have a scale like anything we've seen before. And this is fascinating. This is a slide from Andreessen Horowitz, and he said it's now 100 times cheaper to do technology. And I can vouch for that. When I did my first startups, I literally had to raise millions of dollars just to get off the ground. Servers and software and infrastructure, very expensive. Now, any kid with a credit card goes to Amazon Web Services and they're up and running in 15 minutes. And if you're successful, you can actually have these network effects, which are fascinating because we see positive feedback loops in networks. And this creates new economic business models. And we have a phenomenon now, which is not a technology phenomenon, it's an economic phenomenon called category kings. Winner takes all. As I said in the introduction, Google, for example, in Europe has 97% market share. Who's number 2? Nobody cares. Paytm, great example, 200 million users, category king, and honestly, it's going to be really difficult to do something that even comes close. We have this thing in the network economy called category kings, which are winner takes all. And I believe very quickly you have to figure out what your role is going to be. Are you Batman or Robin? Are you a platform or are you a provider? And this is fascinating in a world that is changing so fast. As I said, I spent a lot of time looking at the category kings out of the Silicon Valley ecosystem. This is my favorite graph to explain the role of Facebook. What you see here is fascinating. This is the US data. What you see here is the total number of SMSs, text messages, of all the mobile operators in the US. All the Vodafones and all the T-Mobiles and all the Sprints. And this is the total number of messages on WhatsApp on a daily basis. Well, I can guarantee you, if you would work for Vodafone in US in 2010, one, in 2010 they were still printing money with SMS. Two, they had, enormous growth. Look at that, they had a fantastic year. And if the CEO of Vodafone would have asked, what's going to happen next? They would have said, that. And then the reality is that. This is disruption. The number one fear of a telco today is that they become a dumb pipe. It's called the dumb pipe syndrome. They connect the users, but they don't actually capture the value. It's the Facebooks who are capturing all the value on top of that. And this is fascinating. Just this week, they launched Facebook Messenger for under 13-year-olds. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. You can only say, why didn't the telcos innovate before actually the platform players have? I'm really fascinated by this company. What is interesting is that every employee at Facebook, when they enter, they get this little red book. It's called the Little Red Book, ironically. And on the first page, it says, if we don't create the thing that kills Facebook, somebody else will. This is almost built-in paranoia that disruption is very real, even for the disruptors. My favorite of these is Amazon. What Amazon has been doing is fantastic, not just moving into the physical space. I know that Amazon is really strong here in India as well. This is the growth of Amazon over the last couple of years, revenue, and this is profit. They don't care about profit. It's even reverse. If Amazon makes a quarterly profit, the CEO, Jeff Bezos, he basically excuses himself. He says, I'm very sorry. We have no idea what happened. We made a profit. This will never happen again. It's fascinating. And the result is category kings, because this is the growth of Amazon versus all the other e-commerce players. Category kings. Last year alone in the US, Amazon took 66% of all the growth in the e-commerce market just for themselves. Category kings is something we've never seen before in the economy. And it's the result of networks and technology. And in the 20th century, we had many car companies, many oil companies, many banks. In the 21st century digital economy, we have absolute category kings. Somebody's going to win a Nobel Prize on the economics of category kings. The result in the US is devastating. Retail is crumbling. John Malone, the CEO of Liberty Global, recently said Amazon is like a Death Star, moving in striking distance of every industry on the planet. Now, that may be over-exaggerating, but it is fascinating to see that these category kings become extremely powerful and dominant. And I'm going to show you this clip.
I'm the founder of Amazon.com.
A little bit more audio on this
It's an
one.
exciting place to be on the web right now. Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, it's just incredible. What's really incredible about this is that this is day one. This is the very beginning. This is the Kitty Hawk stage of electronic commerce. What does day two look like? What does day two look like? Day two is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. And that is why it is always day one.
I think this is brilliant. This describes, in essence, the absolute fear of getting into routine. And think about this. I mean, many of you are just discovering what to do in this digital new normal. And this is somebody who is terrified about losing his edge in this new normal. Day two is the worst thing that could happen to a company like Amazon. And I think this is fascinating. Think about this. This is, in my opinion, what we're now seeing happening. Just this week, we've seen an amazing thing happen in the US. CVS, one of the largest pharmaceutical players, is merging with Aetna, one of the largest healthcare insurance, in a $69 billion deal. And when you look at the rationale, they said it's a way to actually ward off Amazon. They are terrified that Amazon is going to get into the pharmaceutical business, and as a result, we see these almost panicking mergers in an industry. Absolutely fascinating. And when I said these are the 5 stages of grief, maybe these are the 5 stages of what happens when you don't invest in this day after tomorrow. And honestly, a lot of these companies have reason to doubt. If you look at, for example, Facebook, 97% of their revenue is just ads. A company like Apple, 63% is one product. Even Amazon is really dependent on a number of very, very core products. But even then, their growth and their rise into this economy is absolutely fascinating. Now, we're all familiar with that. And look at India. I mean, Amazon is here and Facebook is here. What is really interesting now, as I said in the beginning, is we see the rise of a new digital ecosystem, which is coming out of China. And if you want to understand China, I think China is fascinating in terms of the evolution. This is world GDP. And at the bottom, you see the portion of China in world GDP. And for thousands of years, China was 1/3 of the world GDP, and then China just completely missed out on the Industrial Revolution. I mean, China became less than 6% of world GDP. Now they're rebounding like crazy. And in my opinion, what is happening now with the new Silk Road is an enormous economic expansion. They're really taking advantage of the fact that Trump was elected to expand even more aggressively. And what it's doing now is in this new Silk Road, it's taking their digital category kings with them. And these used to be the category kings of China. They're now the category kings of the new Silk Road. Baidu was the search engine of China. Baidu is now the search engine of the new Silk Road. If you look at Alibaba, more powerful than anything that Amazon has ever done, not just B2B, B2C, and everything in between. Look at Singles Day a year ago, Singles Day this year from 17 to 25 billion, just in 1 year. Singles Day, 1 day revenue. They're now controlling everything in between. Look at the recent merger between Maersk and Alibaba. Fascinating to see what is happening. And my favorite one is Tencent, the operating system of China. WeChat really has become the way China works. If you want to get anything done in China, WeChat is the operating system of China. And it's fascinating. Look at mobile payments. And this is why the Paytm thing was really interesting for me. What you see happening here, I was in Shenzhen 2 months ago. I went to a Häagen-Dazs. I wanted to pay for my ice cream with my credit card, and they laughed me out of the store. A credit card is seen as prehistoric in China at the moment. Me trying to pay for my ice cream with a credit card was like trying to pay for my groceries with a camel or a goat. That was the equivalent that was happening there. Fascinating. And what is really interesting there is that we're now seeing the investments that are being plowed into these new technologies is bigger than anything I've ever seen. We're seeing the rise of a polarization. There's Google and there's Baidu. There's Amazon and Alibaba. There is Facebook and WeChat. There is Uber and Didi. There is Tesla, BYD, YouTube, you could Tudo, Apple, Xiaomi, you could go on, but this is the ecosystem that started it. This is the new ecosystem, and you have to figure out what you're going to do. Are you going to be taking this, or are you going to be building this? And this is fascinating. This is the digital unicorns in the world. And you see, this is the huge Silicon Valley ecosystem. This is the huge new Silk Road ecosystem. As you can see, Europe has completely lost the digital race. But this is an opportunity. I mean, the possibility you have in the next couple of years to be the 3rd dominant player and to think about building platforms that are bigger than just India, I think are an amazing opportunity where you have to figure out how you're going to achieve that. And it becomes interesting because information now becomes core. And this is the challenge for most organizations. If I put it black and white, IT departments in the old normal were a big T, a lot of technology, and a small I. IT departments in the new normal are a colossal I and a small t. And that's a big transition. I still see many companies out there who are digitizing their old analog processes. Wrong. You need to rethink your processes for a world where technology becomes normal. And that is fundamentally different. And information is at the core. Being able to extract, and this is what these new players do very, very well. They are brilliant at extracting information, refining it, and turning that into insight. And if you want to be relevant for your customers, that is essential. I was sitting in the audience yesterday here when there was a wonderful discussion about social media. That's just the tip of the iceberg. It's about understanding your customers are giving off heat every single moment of the day, capturing that, refining that, and being able to turn that into value. And I'll show you one very practical example. I'm a huge Disney fan. I took my kids to Disney World the moment that they announced this new feature. And if you've been to Disney World in Florida, you've seen this. You get a magic band, which is a very simple bracelet that traces you through the park. And it's wonderful because you don't need anything else. You don't need a key to get into your hotel room because you just doop, magic band, and you're in. You don't need a card to get into the park. You just doop, magic band, you're in. And the best thing is you don't need a credit card or a cash or a wallet. You pay for everything with your magic band. So you just doop, a t-shirt, doop, a hamburger, fantastic. Huh? My two children realized the potential of that in 2.7 seconds, I think. Yeah? I got a very interesting bill 5 days later. Huh? But what was fascinating is I didn't care. The average upspend is 17%. I mean, users of the park spend 17% more. But customer satisfaction is up 23%. And the reason is they know where you are in the park. They know exactly what you do. On the app you say, I'm going to go to Space Mountain at 3 o'clock. And it says, you know what? You're not going to get there. Or there's a long line. Wait 45 minutes. You will have 0 wait. That's brilliant. That's value. What this example shows is that Disney turned information into value. And they didn't just capture big data and turn it into value for Disney, they turned it into value for the end consumer. I see many of you saying, yes, big data, capture data, and turn it into value for you. But how many of you are turning into value for the end consumer? Nobody complains about privacy in Disney. Nobody. They don't even call it privacy, they call it magic, which is a different way of looking at things. Huh? But it's fascinating. I think we're now seeing that information becomes core. And once we start to talk about information, of course we need to have this debate. Huh? If you don't want to sleep tonight, look at this website. This is the scariest website in the world. It's called Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica is probably one of the most prominent players out there in turning information into changing audience behaviors. And if you go to the website, this is the website. This is about as scary as it gets. Huh? They said, oh, we use data to change audience behavior. Click on commercial or click on political. Blue and red. This is blue pill, red pill. Huh? And you click on commercial and they say we capture data and we nudge users to change their buying profiles. And they work with some of the largest advertising agencies in the world. You click on commercial and you say, oh, we help people get elected. And they're not shy about showing what they've done. They put this guy as a reference on their website. They're saying, oh, we've got this guy elected. Well, that's a pretty good reference, yeah? If you can get that clown elected, then, yeah, they probably have powerful software. Huh? If you really don't want to sleep, then Google Guardian, Brexit, Cambridge Analytica. You'll find an amazing article where probably this company was not only instrumental in getting Trump elected, probably got the British to take the Brexit vote, which is one of the dumbest decisions they've ever done. Fascinating. And I believe information becomes core, trust becomes essential. And this is why I was here yesterday. Blockchain. I mean, I honestly believe what happened 25 years ago with the World Wide Web, it changed content to consumers forever. And it can happen again. Network logic has the capability of transforming B2B and transactions in almost the same profound way as what happened 25 years ago. And I think this is really interesting. The economists called it the trust machine. We now have a huge debate on cryptocurrencies in the financial world. CEO of JP Morgan said it's a fraud. Bitcoin is a fraud. Head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, said this could replace central banks. I mean, the debate in itself is fascinating. I believe this is the moment to really double down, and I think network logic might be the way to really unlock that. So networks and information, but we're just getting started. I mean, we're now seeing that we're turning information into intelligence. And we've seen the science. I mean, Kasparov was humiliated 20 years ago by IBM Deep Blue. A year and a half ago, Lee Sedol, the pride of Korea, the best Go player in Korea, was humiliated by DeepMind. And he was heartbroken. When this happened, he was one of the best Go players in the world, and he was humiliated by a neural network. And you know the story. What you maybe not know is, since then, he's asked for a rematch. Since then, they've played 53 rematches, and Google won 52. What happened in the 53rd is hilarious. They were playing the 53rd rematch, and some IT guy tripped over a wire and accidentally unplugged DeepMind, and they called it a draw. And Lee said, yeah, draw's fine. I'm good with that. Yeah. I mean, we're at a point in time where almost anything that can be done by humans is done probably better by algorithms. This is the AI of Carnegie Mellon, Libratus. They put Libratus in front of the best poker players in a tournament in Las Vegas, and Libratus just cleared their pockets. How many of you have trained in AI today? Probably all of you. I mean, if you used Waze to get here, if you used Gmail to read your email, if you used Google Maps, you've all trained in AI. We're constantly feeding information for these AIs to get better and better. And I get really excited. As an engineer, I think, wow, this is wow, huh? I mean, fantastic, generative. You remember this? About a year and a half ago, Skype Translator. You just download the app, you talk into your smartphone, and it's automatically translated into the language of your participant. And this a year ago was wow. And then 1 month ago, Google launches the Pixel Buds, which are just simple wireless earphones that have 14 natural language translations built into the system. And people say, but Google Translate sucks. It sucks now. And the more we use it, the more we train it, the better it gets. This is one of my favorite ones. It's called AutoDraw. This is a Google product. You just go to autodraw.com. If you haven't tried it, try it. It's for people who don't know how to draw very well. You sketch something, it says, do you mean that? Yeah, yes, I mean that. Huh? It's the, do you mean that website. Huh? It's fascinating, and it's simple to use. I play this with my kids all the time. You draw something, it says, do you mean that? Yes, I mean that. Huh? And it's interesting, because what you see is that it's just an AI and the network and draw, and that becomes AutoDraw. But this is going to be built into AutoCAD. Every architect out there who is designing an apartment, AutoCAD is going to say, do you mean that? Yes, I actually mean that, yeah. I'm an engineer. What do you think is going to happen in engineering? Do you think we can beat the wisdom of all the engineers out there? Even when we're designing electronics? I mean, even when we're going to be coding, maybe software architect is going to be the job that will be replaced by AI faster than anything else. Think about this. We are now seeing, we're building the technology that can make ourselves actually redundant. And especially when we put that into automation, we're going to see amazing things. I think this is the way you should look at it. This is the combination of ooh and wow. Huh? I think he has that. Practice on that facial expression. This is very important. You'll need that in the next 20 years. And I've got a great job. I can follow all these things. I was in Mountain View recently. These guys, I have no idea why, but they built a golf robot. And they put the golf robot onto any golf course, and it looks at the topology of the terrain, looks at the wind patterns, and then is capable of doing a hole-in-one on any hole. Well, whatever we play as humans is an approximation of what robots can do. And you've all seen these movies, right? This is the Boston Dynamics. I mean, used to be owned by Google. This is Atlas 2 years ago. This is Atlas 1 year ago. Learned how to stack boxes in Walmart. And this is George. This is the robot trainer. This caused a little bit of a storm on the internet. George is the robot trainer. George is training the robot. And first you think, George is training the robot. Well, he looks like a cool guy, hipster guy, beard and everything, you know. And then after a while you think, is he training the robot or is he bullying the robot? Huh? And there seems to be a fine line. And then this wonderful meme appeared where the feelings of the machine were shown, where the sentiments of the robot were visualized, and where after a while you start to get genuine empathy for the machine. And certainly when that happens, you would totally understand this type of behavior. It's fascinating to see. And what is interesting is, this is the one that came out 3 weeks ago, where in just 2.5 years' time, they've taught this robot to start thinking about running a parkour. I mean, I probably couldn't do what that robot is doing. I could stack boxes, but I couldn't do that. And then he does that magical backflip, and I love it when he puts his hands up and says, yeah, I've done it. Fascinating to see that we're almost on a Moore's law type of extrapolation. We're seeing Moore's law, but now happening out into mechanics. And people say, oh, this is pretty scary. This is science fiction. No, it's not. And I always take this analogy. You all know this picture. This is the famous kitty hawk. People say, oh, this is where we learned how to fly. No, this is where we did it. I mean, physics-wise, Bernoulli's law, every engineer knows this. I mean, 150 years before the Wright brothers, we've learned exactly how to calculate the flow of a wing and it creates lift. And what did the Wright brothers do? They put a 12 horsepower engine onto the wing, and 150 years after Bernoulli, this is the first time that we had enough trust to actually make it happen, and boom, now you take a plane like you take a bus. I believe in the last 65 years, we've known exactly how to make machines that think. We've known exactly how to build algorithms that can develop themselves. The only problem is we didn't have the horsepower to make it work until now. With the advent of the cloud, we now finally have the possibilities. And if you ask me, where are we? I think we are exactly at that kitty hawk stage in terms of AI. And I get really, really excited about this. I think the possibilities that we have lying in front of us are absolutely crucial. But what does it mean for the IT people in the room? It means that you have to look forward beyond just your today. These are the questions that you have as CIO today. Cloud, social, big data, mobile. Honestly, a lot of you are concerned, where is our data? In the era of the cloud, where is our data? Honestly, irrelevant very soon. Because the big question here in this type of day after tomorrow is going to be, where is our intelligence? And that will be much more crucial than just where is our core data. I mean, this dumb pipe syndrome that I talked about is going to be something that almost every industry has to deal with. And if you look at IT, I mean, classic IT, and some of you still have a big portion of classic IT. It was on-premise, and it was long cycles. And the first tension that we had in the last couple of years with the advent of digital is that it's about this agility. I mean, ERP are long cycles, mobile development, short cycles. And this digital thing really has this tension of, is it built in or bolted on? That's the #1 challenge. The second thing, in this advent of the cloud, we started to talk, what do we need to do on-premise and what can we do out there? And this idea of the network being a prominent element there has been crucial. And I think we're about to add another layer. It's this speed and network thinking. It's about being able to put IT there with the agility you need from digital, but with this idea of not doing it yourself, but using the power of platforms and networks out there. And that is going to generate, in my opinion, a whole opportunity and also a necessity for us to actually address that. What I think is crucial is that we really figure out how to do that at scale. And some people say, oh my God, this whole AI thing, jobs are going to disappear. Yes, but instead of fearing it, why don't you think about how to leverage that? This is the latest data that came out of MIT just a couple of weeks ago, and it talks about salaries This is, salaries, salaries. And this is very unlikely to disappear, and this is very likely to disappear. Next 20 years. And what you see, very strange, is we humans make very strange choices. One of the jobs that won't disappear in the next 20 years are surgeons, which is crazy. You get a tumor in your brain, and you have a choice between a robot with laser precision or a guy with shaky hands, and you say, well, I'd prefer the shaky hands guy, which is psychologically insane, but this is how we deal with it. CEOs also have a almost 0% chance of becoming obsolete. But look at that. Jobs like accounting and auditors have a 94% chance of being automated in the next 20 years because algorithms will be able to do that much more efficiently than anybody else. And then we have a large number of jobs there, but low paid, that we're never going to give our baby to a robot. But that is something that we have to take into account. I think the correct way to look at it, the CEO of IBM, Ginny Rometty, said maybe only 10% of jobs are going to disappear, but 100% will change. I think that's the mentality you need to have. How much time do I have, Raki? 5 minutes, yeah. So what is my point? I think almost every single one of these day after tomorrow technologies is both wow and ooh at the same time. And I'm fascinated by this. I mean, as a technologist, I get really excited about this. But look at this. The world of AI and machine learning, fabulous, fascinating. I can't wait for that to happen. But this idea of machines smarter than us is a little bit scary. If you look at the possibilities of Internet of Things and 3D printing, robotics, this could lead us into a new industrial revolution. But do we think about the enormous systemic shift in jobs that this could create? If you look at network logic, I'm amazed at the new possibilities of blockchain. But if you thought a computer virus was scary, think about the enormous amount of abundant malignant complexity that we're releasing onto the world. And even things like augmented and virtual reality, think about how this could transform education. Wow! But the addictive powers. Point is, almost every single thing that you have in the next 20 years is going to be wow and ooh at the same time. But the question is, what do you need to do? Is the world moving faster? I think it is. We're rapidly going into this volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity world. And this is the traditional, if you're an incumbent, yeah, I mean, you see new things, and first you think, blah, blah. But then here you think, ah, shit. Huh? And the timing between the blah and the oh shit, that is the corporate myopia, and that is shortening. And you need to figure out how to actually overcome that bias. And there are two things I want you to think about. One is, when do you have to move? And the second question is, what do you have to do? And the when is actually quite simple. Whenever you do something, you start something, you engage, you build something, you start, you grow, you peak, and you decline. This is the cycle of life. But if you wait until here to do something new, you're dead. And in a world that's moving fast, even that is too slow. So this is the ideal moment. The moment that you're doing really well, that's the moment where you have to think about the next phase. And if you keep on doing that, you can basically live forever and keep reinventing yourself. So that's easy. But then the question becomes, what do you do? And I came up with an extremely simple model. How much of your time do you spend on today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow? And what is today? Today is the 112 emails in your inbox right now that you didn't know you had to worry about last night. And we spend an enormous amount of time in today. What is tomorrow? That's the little joke I made in the beginning. It's Budget 2018. It's that absurd mythical exercise that we do, this sadistic ritual where we put in imaginary numbers and consolidate that into a budget. And almost every time you see that people look at tomorrow with the things that we know today. And this is exactly the Facebook SMS ... red lines. And then this is day after tomorrow. New ideas, new concepts, new business models, new technologies that could change the rule of the game. How much of your time in your company do you spend on today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow? Many people tell me 70, 20, 10. And I think this is your New Year's resolutions every Monday. Every Monday you drive to work saying 70, 20, 10. And every Friday night you come home and you think it wasn't 70, 20, 10. It was closer to 93, 7, and 0. And the problem is value. Yes, today is important, current value, tomorrow future value, but this is huge in terms of long-term value. And if it's 93, 7, and 0, you are destroying an enormous potential in long-term value. Anyway, simple model. I'll tell you a true story. The book was finished more than a year ago. Then I went to Australia. I apologize for the language, but Australians are known for their language and their candor. I did a workshop with an Australian company. This was on the flip chart. At the end of a long day, the CEO said, "Mr. Hinssen, thank you very much. We learned a lot. Too bad your model is wrong." I said, "How could this be wrong? This is the simplest model in the world." He said, "You forgot something." And he took a big red pen and he drew that. I said, "What is that?" And he said, "That's the shit of yesterday we need to clean up, which creates negative value." And I urge you to think about this. What is your relationship in your company between the soy and the dot? How much of your time are you spending to clean up the mess of the legacy, and how much are you really investing in that day after tomorrow? And I think this is the fundamental question. Raki, I could go on for hours, as you can imagine, but let me bring this to a close. I think we are rapidly approaching a time where you need to figure out how much of your time do you want to spend on controlling your comfort zone, and how much on reinventing yourself to be relevant for the day after tomorrow. And I always make this joke, large corporations need governance. Really big corporations even have an audit committee. And I don't want to offend anyone, but who are the people who sit on the audit committee? They are, by definition, the most boring people in the company. You need people who follow the rules and color inside the lines, and you might need that. My point is, every company who has an audit committee should have a counterweight, the disruption committee, filled with people who are constantly saying, why don't we color outside of the lines? And I think this is a fundamental question. I think you need to lose your comfort zone from time to time to think about the day after tomorrow. I love this quote from Woody Allen. Confidence is what you have before you understand the problem. And this comes from a man who's had a lot of problems in his life. He knows what he's talking about. Fundamentally, I think we're entering one of the most exciting times in the world of technology. But it's not the world of technology anymore. What we talk about during these days is not technology. It's about culture. It's about risk. It's about strategy. It's about ambition. And above all, it's about thinking about ways to use this to completely rethink how we think about customers, to completely rethink how we think about companies and organizations, to optimize what we do, but above all, to try things to reinvent our core business models. And I love this quote from Mandela. I never fail. I either win or I learn. And I think this is the fundamental thing. It's about figuring out a way to actually try things. And I'm going to end with where I started. A Tale of Two Cities. This is not the introduction to the book. The introduction is much more beautiful. It's the best of times and it's the worst of times. You will see stuff in the next 10 years that is wow and ooh at the same time. But it's the age of wisdom and the age of foolishness. And you will have to figure out what is hype and what is reality. But it is an amazing opportunity. It is the epoch of belief. It is the season of light. It is the spring of hope and the winter of despair. I can only wish you a lot of success in this day after tomorrow. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Mesmerizing.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
We could go on and on.
Oh, I could do a whole day.
I think that's actually the voice there as well. I have really run out of adjectives to actually describe all this. A ton of research, enormous amount of lectures could not actually match up to what Peter actually walked us through in the last 1 hour. Amazing.
Thank you very much.
Really good. So this is an opportunity for us to actually ask those questions if you have any. So let's actually look at some questions over here. So you have a question? Okay.
Still struggling with technology. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Peter. Really mesmerizing, as our chairperson said. I just want to ask one thing around, we talked a lot about the new generation and how they are going to perceive technology, but then we have another actor, which is the government. And you can give a good outsider's view as to how governments around the world are trying to mess up with the technology, because across all countries, there is a lot of emphasis on governments trying to link up a lot of your data and trying to, you asked the question, where is your data? But then there are governments who's trying to specifically put data within boundaries, within geographies. So do you think this is going counterproductive with the way, the age in which we are moving, because they are trying to live in the day before yesterday, not the day after tomorrow?
It's a very, very good question. And I think what I see around the world is different approaches. The US has very much a government which is trying to do as little as possible to constrain entrepreneurship. In Europe, we now have a government which is trying to contain it. And for example, in terms of privacy, we now have GDPR in Europe, which is an absolute disaster. And the European Commission still hasn't understood that something in the cloud doesn't have geographical boundaries. We talked earlier about China. What you see in China is a very strong control between the government, the technology strategy, and how they work with companies. Companies like Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, Huawei are very closely connected to the government. I think what is essential is that you find a modus operandi, that you also take the government into that day after tomorrow thinking. And maybe this is something that you all have to do. Instead of a government where you wait until they give you orders, maybe you have to constructively start the dialogue and to build that day after tomorrow together. And I think this might be an open call for you to maybe reach out, because this is essential. As I said before, you have a unique opportunity to take the geography of India, to take the scale of India, and to take the intellect of India to be an absolute player in this geopolitical, but then you need a government which is capable of really thinking outside of boundaries and into that day after tomorrow.
Excellent. Yep.
Like the yesteryears, when you did credit card transaction or you took a loan, data was shared among all players.
Yeah.
Tomorrow also, platforms have to share their information across all players. To me, Amazon is just a portlet. There'll be many portlets in the world, and that may be one of the criteria of coming into the, when we actually, I was there when Amazon started Clickstream. Okay, I was one of the persons who developed the Clickstream software for Oracle. But Amazon went a long way after that. But coming to the point is that, is few companies going to rule the world, or is it a platform that is going to share among all companies?
It's a very valid point. And I think what is interesting now is that this concentration is something like we've never seen before. I talked about the category kings, and this is going to be essential how we deal with that. I go back to the Chinese example, Alibaba. To your point, Alibaba in China has become the largest provider of credit into the Chinese economy. And this is fascinating, because if you're a bank, suppose you ask for a loan. Well, if you're a bank, you have to go to the balance sheet of this company, and the balance sheet deposited will be 6 months old, 12 months old, and then you have to figure out if you're creditworthy today. This is prehistoric, huh? So Alibaba stepped in, and Alibaba sees in real time your orders, they see the payment, and they have an algorithm to figure out if you're creditworthy. In 3 years' time, Alibaba has become the #1 provider of credit into the Chinese economy. And this is scaring the banks crazy. Huh? But you're absolutely right. This concentration of power is something that we need to figure out if this is what we feel comfortable with, and if we want to actually endorse that, or find mechanisms that you balance that. Absolutely. And again, this is where the government comes in and plays a hugely crucial role. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's one question, one last question, if anyone would like to ask a question. There's a question there.
Hi, Peter. It was absolutely brilliant. We are one of the very few companies working in eastern part of the India, heavily on VR and AR.
Yeah.
And the fundamental problem that we are facing right now is the software, the basic softwares that we use typically for building the VRs and ARs. And there is across the world, if you see the games also, there are a lot of technical issues that we face. And there is nothing actually existing in the market wherein we can buy those platforms and then we can build on that. Do you really think there is an opportunity that there is a need of that platform worldwide? I'm sure you have worked a lot on VRs and ARs, and I'm sure you have talked to people about it as well. So if you could just take us through to that, because we are working on it for quite some time, but there's no platform which gives a real good quality in terms of the other things that we do, and people tends to relate us to our other creatives that we do. So
yeah, and so first of all, I think AR and VR is actually on the cusp of breaking out. We've been talking about this technology for a long time, but this is almost the same as my Kitty Hawk example. You need the processing power to make sure that it runs smoothly enough, that you don't get the motion sickness. I mean, this is something where we're now getting to the point where technologically we can solve it. But the platforms to make it efficient, to make it affordable, to make it smooth, just aren't there yet. Huh?
Exactly.
And I think both on the hardware side, I've seen a couple of things where it's almost, it should be as simple and as lightweight as a normal pair of glasses. And this is going to happen in the next couple of years. On the software side, I think there's a huge opportunity. I don't believe that there is any reason why you couldn't do that here, why you couldn't develop that here, build that here. I mean, as I said, for almost 20 years, we've looked at Silicon Valley and said, oh, that's where it happens. The Chinese, of all people, have shown us.
That's exactly my point. Was we are working on it, but parallelly we are facing a lot of financial challenges as well. Because as you said, I mean, these are
So let me make a broader comment on that. I think one of the crucial things that you need to figure out is not just to enable startups and entrepreneurship, because I think you're doing that. You also need to figure out how to scale. And that means that from a financial, from a venture capital, from a risk, from an icon, role model, you need examples where you can say, we can actually do that. And I think this is going to be a collective discussion you need to have. The potential is here, but it's now not just starting things, but being able to scale. And I wish you a lot of success in that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It seems we can't have enough of Peter over here, but then I would like to conclude the session over here. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Peter Hinssen.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Hinssen.
This is
May
the
I
new normal.
request
Oh, yes, absolutely. Super.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I request Mr. K.K. Mahapatra, Organizing Secretary and Associate Vice President, INFOCOM and Chief IT Advisor, ABP Private Limited, to kindly come forward and present mementos to Mr. Peter Hinssen and Mr. Lakshminarayan Rao. Thank you very much for that brilliant leadership keynote. The day after tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together once again for Mr. Peter Hinssen.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'd also like to request Mr. K.K. Mahapatra to present a memento to Mr. Lakshminarayan Rao. Thank you very much. Thank you for this wonderful, wonderful session.